involvement in practice. Again, Mrs. Maria Mavris from the European Medicines Agency will go more in detail into what we have just learned in the previous session. We circulated several resources already on what are the different procedures where patients can review and bring input. But as I also see I have some background noise, I will now give the floor to Maria for the second presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Isabel. I will just share my screen again. Someone else is sharing. I'll just wait. Okay, so we'll carry on. I hope everyone had a good break, a chance to stretch your legs and your neck. So in this next section, I'm going to talk to you about two particular procedures, scientific advice and scientific advisory groups, where patients can be involved and how people are involved. And then also I'll give you an example of the review of a product, which was basically a safety communication. It was a response to a safety alert, and this was reviewed, and then you'll see how information is taken up and used. And then I'll finish with methodologies for patient engagement and support at EMA. We'll have another quick couple of questions on Slido, and then I will conclude with just showing you an overview of patient engagement during the COVID crisis and where you can find information if you're interested. Oops, this wasn't meant to be, sorry, it wasn't meant to be animated. I'm not sure what's going on here. Sorry about this. Could you just wait one moment? I apologize for this, and especially with your recording.
No problem, Maria.
I have a technical issue here.
We can do cut, copy, it's fine.
Great, great. I apologize. Okay. Sorry, I just had to shut my slides down and open them again. There was a problem with that. So now I think it should all be okay. Okay, so I'll just start screen sharing again. And again, I apologize for the technical issues. Okay, so coming back to this figure, which you've seen before with the different stages of the medicine development, we're going to be starting off by looking at scientific advice, which takes part here under the early dialogue. So here you'll remember you had the option of medicine coming in first to the orphan committee or advanced therapy or pediatric. And then here also under early dialogue is scientific advice. The next aspect we'll look at is the scientific advisory groups, which are called either by the Human Medicines Committee or the Safety Committee. So you can see they're in both evaluation of medicines or in the safety monitoring. So if we start with the first scientific advice. So this is the area that I work in extensively, trying to find patients or carers who can be involved in these early discussions with EMA when they are liaising with companies. So what companies do is, as they're developing medicines, they might say it would be a good idea to go to EMA for scientific advice, or they can actually go to any of the national regulators as well, because all of the national medicines agencies do scientific advice. But if they want to be sure, for example, that they're on the right track for a marketing authorization, then they will come to the EMA and request scientific advice. And it's a fee. It's an activity that has a fee associated with it. And there's certain incentives. For example, medicine with an orphan designation, that company will have a lower fee for scientific advice. Or if it's a small to medium size enterprise, an SME, then that company will also have a reduced fee for scientific advice, and sometimes actually no fee at all. So scientific advice is important. It just gives the company information to make sure that they're on the right track to be the way they're conducting their clinical trials, the way they're looking at their manufacturing, their statistical aspects, anything really in the whole process of making a medicine, getting the medicine to the market, they can ask about in scientific advice. What's important is that the advice provided is not legally binding. So here the company can come and request scientific advice, but then they can choose whether or not they follow the recommendations that were given by the working party. But it might not surprise you to see that when a company does follow scientific advice, provided that they usually have a higher degree of success at the time of marketing authorization. But scientific advice is a very important procedure because it is another one of the stages where patients were involved at a very early stage. And this also started with the rare disease patients who were asking to be involved to give their personal experience of what it's like to live with a disease. They know its treatment, and they also, a lot of rare disease patients, as those of you on the call, will know a lot more about your disease than sometimes you're treating your general practitioner. So the areas where we say patients contribute in scientific advice, because on this working party, so this working party is made up of experts again, like the committees as well, but there aren't any patient members of the working party. So we involve patients quite frequently, and in one of the next slides, you'll see some of the numbers of the numbers of patients involved annually. And so patients usually contribute to the development plan, the clinical part of the scientific advice request. So the company will submit a document. And please interrupt me if this is not clear at all. So say, for example, company X is developing a medicine for a disease, and they say, look, we're not sure we're on the right track. So we want to ask some questions and just see that we're really doing this in the right way. And so they will write a letter, and in the letter they will say, can you confirm, or can the working party confirm that the population we have chosen is the right population for this study? And then underneath that, they will give all of their justification, there's scientific evidence as to why they've chosen this particular population. Or if they're choosing a comparator drug, they'll ask a question, and then they'll explain why they've made that particular comment. They'll explain why they've made that particular choice. So it's a large document submitted by the company that's asking for advice on all of these questions. Now, when they have clinical questions, it's very good to involve patients, especially because the questions could cover anything from the patient population, the endpoints. Has the study been successful? Is this meaningful to patients? Is this the right comparator medicine that's being used? Is this what's actually being used by patients, in Europe, and are they comparing it with the right treatment, if there is a treatment? The quality of life, the feasibility of the trials, because sometimes the trials might be great on paper, but in practice might not be good at all, because especially if you look at trials in children, maybe they're during school hours, maybe they're during times where, the disease or the condition doesn't allow for certain studies to be done. So all of these aspects that really living with the disease, you know more about than someone who might just be trying to investigate it. So patients and carers can be invited to participate to these meetings, and either the meetings happen with the company in person or virtually now, or in writing. You can also respond in writing depending on the outcome. So just to give you a little bit of information about the impact, over the last few years, we've been monitoring very carefully the impact of patient involvement in these advice procedures. And they've shown that the letter that is then sent to the company, or we have shown this, results in changes due to patient input in 1/4 of the advice letters where patients have been involved. And so this is actually a very nice level of success, to be honest, where the patients come in, provide their input, and this then changes the advice given to the company. So we're very pleased with that. And then overall, we've also seen that 90% of patients actually agree with a development plan. So this is not mutually exclusive. You can have a patient who participates in an advice procedure and says, yes, this looks good. I think that's right, but I would make these suggestions, and those suggestions could be carried through into the final advice letter. But overall, the 90% of people that say, yes, we agree with this development plan is still very important, that we've had people living with a condition in some form or another actually looking at the plan and saying that they agree with it. Of course, one or two patient voices, and this is something you might have questions about later, how representative is that? This is something that we get asked quite a lot. Is one or two patient voices enough? But as you may remember from the earlier part of the presentation, we can also do larger surveys as well to get input of a larger number of patients. But still, we're very happy with this, this kind of impact of patient input. Just to look a little bit more at scientific advice, you can see that it probably started a little bit before 2008, and it was focused very much on procedures for orphan medicines. So in the beginning, the numbers were quite low. And then here in 2013, the agency said, well, it's worked very well with orphan medicines. Why don't we extend it to all medicines? So you see the numbers started to increase, and now we're getting up into hundreds. And so it actually is a very busy activity. And also here in 2013 as well is when we started doing joint scientific advice with health technology assessment bodies too. So now we have scientific advice for orphan medicines, for all medicines, and as well as joint with health technology assessment reflected in these numbers. On this side here, you'll see the areas, as I described in my previous slide, but where patient input actually, where patients actually input. So the development, in the development plan, you can see that patients gave most input into the endpoints of the studies. So for example, here in this green area, in more than 54% of the scientific advice procedures we looked at, patients made some comment on the endpoints of the development plan, whether they were meaningful to patients, feasible, whether they were worded in the right way. Here also on the population of the patients to be included in the study, 49%. Also the quality of life. So these were the big ones, as well as the feasibility, the standard of care, and the choice of comparator. So you can see that patients are really commenting on all these very important and relevant aspects of the development plan. So that's really at the stage of the early dialogue. And now we're looking a little bit further down at the stage of the authorization, the evaluation for authorization. So you remember that I said that it's the Committee for Human Medicinal Products that receives the very large authorization dossier. And they look at this really evaluating the benefits and the risks of the medicine. But sometimes some questions still remain where they really say, well, what would the patients really consider to be valuable here? And does this benefit outweigh the risk? Or they might be looking at additional questions about what really happens in clinical practice. And so this is why the committee might then request a scientific advisory group. So a group of experts in that area who will come together and they will be asked specific questions by the committee, and we'll always invite a patient to these activities and also discuss the same questions. And this is where patient input is also very helpful. So here we have, with regard to the scientific advisory groups, there are 8 groups that are maintained year-round that cover all these different areas: neurology, psychiatry, oncology, etc. And this link here will take you to the specific scientific advisory groups. But if the medicine or the condition specifically doesn't fit into one of these core groups, then we can convene an ad hoc group as well, where certain experts are invited, including patients, to discuss these issues. So they take place here at the time of the assessment for the evaluation. And in 2020, 42 patients were involved in SAG meetings. We have much fewer meetings than of this type than we have of scientific advice. And here you can see the distribution according to the different types of groups. So for example, 1/3 of the groups were ad hoc, so different subjects, different areas other than the large one will always be oncology, and then we have neurology as well, anti-infectives, and cardiovascular diseases and viral diseases. So this was from last year. Just a couple of words about the safety committee, but again, I won't say too much because Dr. Strauss will join you soon. But the safety committee also has patients as members, as we discussed. And here we have different ways of patient engagement as well. So we have had lots of stakeholder meetings. Here I've illustrated those with patients and healthcare professionals. In particular, we talked about the valproate containing medicines, which then actually went on in 2017 to go towards a public hearing to really look at this issue in greater detail. We also have had stakeholder meetings on retinoids and methotrexate in relation to medication errors. But here, as I mentioned earlier today, in 2017, we had a public hearing with valproate containing medicines, and 2018, we had the quinolones and fluoroquinolones. And these public hearings we have people coming into the agency. It's at the time that the safety committee is meeting. The committee stops, but we open the doors, and then we have a discussion with the public and the committee, who ask questions, and the public gets to present their perspective on their experience with the medicines and its impact. And that all is taken into consideration when drafting the recommendations by the committee based on this public hearing. These are recorded actually and available. So they're live while they're happening, but we've also recorded them and they're published on the EMA website. And I can help you to find those if that's of interest to you. Also here, it's an important reminder that you yourself can report side effects. And if you click on this link, it'll take you to a website called ADR, or Adverse Drug Reaction Reports.eu. And here you can actually click on a link in your language, in your member state, where you can report in the right format. So if you have a side effect to a medicine, you can tell your healthcare professional, but you can also report the side effect yourself and add the information there. And this all goes in to feed a larger safety surveillance system, which Dr. Strauss will tell you about. So now I wanted to touch on Fenspyride, which is a medicine that is not authorized by EMA. It's a nationally authorized medicine. But before I do that, just let me quickly go back here and show you in this in this overall diagram. You can see that there are these documents that are produced and are reviewed by patients at every step of the way. So here, when there is an issue with the safety of a particular medicine, it'll be alerted by the safety committee or the PRAC, and then a safety communication will be produced, as you see here, produced as needed. And these safety communications are reviewed by patients before they are published. So what I'd like to show you is an example of a safety communication that was reviewed by someone, you'll probably recognize their name, and then the impact of that review on the final publication. So the EMA produces a lot of information materials. You may remember that from the first slide where I described what the role of EMA is, and part of our role is to produce legitimate forms of information, something that you can rely on, that you know is evidence-based and is informative, and also in the cases of certain documents written specifically for the audience. So here when a medicine is authorized by EMA, we also produce what's called a medicine overview, which is information about the medicine as I described to you in lay format with a question and answer structure. But in this case, for this medicine, because it wasn't authorized by EMA, there's no medicine overview. And similarly, there's no EMA package leaflet, which is the information that you receive within the package. But here I just wanted to make this point because patients do review these two documents as well prior to publication. But in 2019, there were certain issues that were identified with Fenspyride, and it was determined that a safety communication had to be made and that patients and healthcare professionals had to be alerted to these issues. So this was prepared by EMA and then reviewed by EFA and published. So here, and I hope this is big enough. I hope you can see this. You don't need to read all of the information, but you can see Susanna actually reviewed this. And so it starts off with a reason for background information about the withdrawal. So this was about the withdrawal of this particular medicine from the market. And it said that there were heart rhythm problems, and it was not actually easy to identify, not feasible to identify which patients might be at risk. So in this case, it was recommended by the safety committee to withdraw the medicine from the market. And then here there's information for patients written as bullet points. And so you can see here, Susanna made some comments about the way and it was structured. So you're recommending that this could be complemented with, you can check the medicine ingredients in the package. You could take out, you could say if you need to instead of if needed. You can always add a bullet point saying, please return any unused medicines to the pharmacy for disposal. So these were the kind of very clear points that were made and very helpful points that were made by Susanna during the review. In the next slide, and you'll probably be able to see this better once you have a copy of the slides to get all together, you'll see that that certain aspects were in fact taken into consideration. So here you can see they've added, you can check the ingredients of the medicine in the package leaflet. They've also said return any unused medicines to your pharmacy for appropriate disposal. So you see Susanna's comments were actually very much taken into consideration, and whether if you need to or if needed is very much a personal preference of style of writing. So the medical writer decided to keep with their own style because the message was still the same, but the other aspects were added to help patients and to make that information clearer. Here also, just to complete, sorry, I'm having trouble clicking. There is also information for healthcare professionals as well. And this safety communication is also reviewed by healthcare professionals, and similar kind of thing where they will add comments and then the medical writer will look at it. And then to complete the amount of information that's in there, you'll see more information about the medicines, and it'll give you links and more information. So that's one example of how patients are involved in the review of documents, destined for patients that are published. Should I pause here, Isabel, in case I've not said enough, or if there's anything else you want me to say?
I will raise that question to our participants. Would you like to have any more information on this?
Because in my next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the training that we offer, but which also covers some of this. But if there's anything that's unclear at this point, I can stop for a moment and give you a chance to catch up, or shall I keep going?
I see no hands raised, and rather a comment from Jacqueline saying thank you so far, very clear. So I guess we can continue. Susanna has raised her hand. Sorry.
Okay, great.
I've just seen Maria. Susanna has raised her hand.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to ask an expanding question on the review of the package leaflets and the European public whatever summaries they are on the medicines that are approved. Maybe you would like to say something more about that, because that's a a very important point for
Yes.
patients.
Great. So in fact, on our website, so when a medicine is authorized, just take you quickly back here. So when a medicine is authorized, so usually during the time that this committee, the CHMP, is looking at the evaluation, they're looking at the risk and benefits. Then if we see that the CHMP is going towards a positive opinion, then all of the information that the company has submitted for the assessment is going to be published in what's called a European Public Assessment Report, or an EPAR. So again, another acronym, EPAR, European Public Assessment Report. And our department, and Julia, if she's still on the line, is actually a member of the medical writing team as well as the engagement team. And Julia would be able to provide you with more information. But at the time of this, then a summary of the public assessment report is written for patients. So in this case, it's called a medicine overview, and you can see that written here. So there's two very important documents: the medicine overview, which really gives you a nice example of what is this medicine, what is it used for, how was it assessed, what are safety issues, what are the ongoing kind of considerations. And these are reviewed by patients. Every single one of them is sent out to patients via our eligible organizations or via the individuals that we are in contact with to review that information, make sure that it is clear and written in the right way. And as you could see from the previous example, that maybe there was something that was missing that should also be added in there as well. So that is systematically done, that we send the medicine overview, but then also the package leaflet as well, which is another document that you'll normally find in the box or accompanying your medicines, unless it's something that's administered in hospital. But you can still, if it's centrally authorized medicine, you can still get access to the package leaflet. But these leaflets are also reviewed by patients to make sure that it is clear, that the information is clear, tailored towards the right person, the right audience, and has the right level of information in it. So the timelines are slightly different. For the package leaflets and the medicine overviews, we have a bit more time, but for a safety communication, as you can imagine, it's important to get that information out quickly. So sometimes the turnaround can be very quick, can be a couple of hours. So we like to try to give a warning that there's a safety communication coming, and then we check, Susanna, are you able to do this? Great, okay, we're sending it to you now. And then Susanna prioritized that, sent us the information back. It was reviewed and then finalized and then published on the website and sent out to the relevant patient groups and to the healthcare professionals as well. So I hope that's okay. Great. So I'll just carry on then. I'll continue with the key to successful engagement. And key to successful engagement, I think, is really just to keep trying and to listen to who you're engaging with, and to just keep trying different methodologies, improving, including, diversifying, and to keep interacting with your groups, and to take on any criticism or suggestions as well. So we engage with a diverse group of stakeholders, and I'll show you in the next slide who we do engage with. And then we have very clear criteria for organizations and also individual patients. And in the next session, you'll hear a little bit about the declaration of interest. But as you can imagine, at EMA, we are heavily scrutinized on who we involve in our assessment procedures. So we need to make sure that all of our experts have no competing interest, that people are not working for the pharmaceutical company, working for a pharmaceutical company, or they're not having meetings frequently with pharmaceutical companies, because that's called consulting. Now, let me just make it very clear that for EMA, patient groups working and interacting with pharmaceutical companies is absolutely fine. It's acceptable. It's even recommended, because the earlier that pharmaceutical companies developing medicines for your needs know what your needs are, that is so much better for everyone. However, if in your organization you can keep one person who does not interact with a pharmaceutical company but has access to all the information, then that person can interact with EMA. And that's just because you will have to submit a declaration of interest. It goes on our website. It is public and published, and we are scrutinized and sometimes even taken to court on the basis of which experts we've involved. So please understand, from our point of view, it is not an excluding criteria. It is something that we absolutely have to know who we are working with and what your interactions are in order to be sure that all of our decisions are unbiased, evidence-based, and transparent. Okay, so just that couple of words. Then, of course, as I said, we test and implement different engagement methodologies. We try to develop appropriate support and training for our experts and try to be transparent throughout the whole process. We continuously monitor and we report on engagement, and we have our annual reports that are published usually, well, by the word, annually, but lately they've been published biannually, so every 2 years. So when to engage all along the medicine's life cycle, for us, begin early and do not stop. Just keep that engagement going. So here you can see the logos of the eligible organizations that we work with. These are all published on our website, and all of these organizations fill the criteria which are listed here under organization representatives, the EMA eligibility criteria, which are transparency on the funding of the organization, the structure, accountability, representation, the missions and activities. They're all listed here, so you can have a look at that. And as I said, for individual experts, an individual will have to declare any competing interests that they have, and you'll hear more about this in the next presentation from Erna, so I won't say much more about that. So what kind of methodologies do we have? And this really is just a schematic. It's a nice nice image, but we have face-to-face. We ask, so people can come to meetings, they can come to committee meetings, they can come to scientific advice meetings or SAG meetings. Of course, everything is virtual for the time being, but hopefully we'll get back to some kind of a face-to-face structure at some point as well. You can contribute in writing. If we survey you, if we ask you to contribute to scientific advice and you would like to contribute in writing, that's perfectly fine. And we do that quite a lot. It also gives us a chance to involve more people. We have, you can participate in committee meetings as an invited expert. And this can be very interesting. And you can participate, as I've already said, in surveys, and we are looking more and more at patient preferences. So how do we train and support you? We have an annual training day, and the last year we did this virtually, playing in that Slido quiz, and I'll just finish up the presentation now with a couple of words about COVID and patient engagement within COVID. So as you all know, it's been a situation that has affected us all globally, and there's been a lot of questions around the safety and efficacy of the vaccines. So obviously during such a crisis situation, it was very important to ensure that patients and also healthcare professionals were acting with EMA, working very closely with us, letting us know what was needed from the different patient groups, but also to ensure the confidence in the vaccines as well. So we at EMA developed a pandemic task force, and within the pandemic task force, where they look at all of the vaccines and the other medicines to treat COVID, there are patients and healthcare professionals who are involved there as well, and also provide very important input. EMA has been collaborating also internationally, and again, more acronyms, but here this is the International Coalition of Medicine Regulatory Agencies, the WHO, I think you all know, and the US FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And so we've also been publishing and disseminating key information for patients and healthcare professionals. So we have also published different levels of information around COVID vaccines. And you'll find these on the website. And in fact, there's links to this later in the presentation. But this information was user tested with patients, which was very important actually, because it wasn't only about us getting the information out, but it was about getting the information out in the right way. And so there's information about COVID vaccines. There's also information about the regulatory requirements and safety, etc. So all of these are on our website, and these were user tested by patients. So we also did a call for people who had confirmed COVID cases in order to see if we could involve this pool of people in some of our procedures, in some of our regulatory procedures, or even some of the evaluation reviewing documents, just making sure that this kind of hit all of the right messaging. So these are some of the activities that we have engaged in during COVID, specifically on the engagement aspect. This is in addition to all of the evaluation and pursuing the safety of all of the vaccines and the medicines. And we really were trying to actively disseminate the COVID communications via our network of patient organizations, as well as individual patients, just to make sure, because there's, as you know, as you're very aware, there's been a lot of disinformation out there about the vaccines. And so we just hope that EMA again becomes a reliable source of information, that people will come to EMA for information about the vaccines, and they can go to other agencies such as the ECDC, the European Center for Disease Control, or the WHO for really reliable information, rather than going to Facebook. So here you can see currently we have 4 vaccines authorized in the EU. The first 2 were the messenger RNA vaccines, followed by the AstraZeneca and Janssen, which are the non-replicating adenovirus vaccines, and the dates where they were authorized. And you can find out more information about these vaccines via these links. You can, as I've already mentioned, you can see the medicine overview. So here you can see when you click on a particular medicine, any medicine, here it's the one of the vaccines. When you see overview, it actually links you to the medicine overview, which is all of the information in lay language in all EU languages, and gives you a link to the you can also link to the risk management plan, and then the product information. As I said to you, there was also the package leaflet, which is for patients, where you can, which was reviewed by patients. So this information is here under the product information. You just have to scroll down a little bit. So I also mentioned another one of our engagement strategies, which was to hold public meetings on the vaccines. So the first one was held on the 11th of December, and it was a public meeting where people could just connect via YouTube and watch the public meeting. We also did have people that were connected and had actually asked to speak, and so we had a group of speakers on there as well from the public. And this first one was really about explaining the regulatory processes for the approval of the vaccines. Then we talked about how their safety was going to be monitored, and then we provided information, updated information about the vaccines. So we haven't got another meeting planned yet, but the EMA is holding regular press briefings as well. So you can always link to these to listen to some of the information. But as this information is moving very quickly, I imagine that you'll probably get more relevant, up-to-date information if you just look at our website rather than watching these broadcasts. But they did happen, and they were there to help. So I hope that this has been an interesting presentation for you. I very much appreciate being invited to take you on this journey of really how EMA has evolved with regard to its patient engagement, and some of the tools that we've developed and the different activities that we involve you in. And it's important that while a lot of the documents we work with are really scientific, that you don't have to be a scientist or a doctor. You just have to bring your personal experience of living with a disease, because this is what is the missing element from these discussions, what it means on a day-to-day basis. And so patients really help to bridge the gap between clinical trial data and real world data. And I think one aspect that we're that we consider at EMA to be very important is the transparency. That when you have patients sitting in scientific committees that are there when the scientific advice working party are talking about the advice to give to the medicine developers, when patients are there during the scientific advisory group meetings, reviewing documents, it all adds to the transparency of the process and hopefully understanding how it is actually an incredibly complex process to evaluate the benefits and risks of a medicine. So we're always looking ahead. And at the moment, we're really exploring new ways of data collection, including digital and real world data. We're looking at broadening patient data collection. So as you saw with some of the committees, we either invite patients to come to the committees or they participate in surveys, but we're trying to now look a little more at starting some focus groups and having some in-depth more discussions as well, enriching the training and support with new tools. Of course, a lot of things have gone virtual now, so that opens a lot more scope for us as well with regard to training, and really just ensuring that our system is robust, that we can integrate efficiently patient evidence into the assessments and make sure that that's transparent where patients have been involved.